Hello again and welcome back to our course on Project 2019 Advanced. In this section I'm going to concentrate on an example of earned value analysis and reporting. But first of all I need to cover some general points about earned value analysis, very important points in fact, and then I need to look at the key project options that are relevant to earned value analysis. The first important point is that earned value analysis is done on the basis of comparing progress with a baseline. It therefore makes it absolutely essential that you have saved a baseline. Also, the fact that you are comparing progress means that you must have recorded some progress. So you may be in the very early stages of a project, maybe you only have one task in progress, but until you have recorded some progress, then earned value analysis won't tell you anything at all. The second important point, which is closely related to that one, is that you should have pretty much all of your tasks, resources and assignments in place before you save the baseline, which you're going to use for earned value analysis. There is little point in, say, putting half a dozen tasks, saving the baseline and then putting in another 20 tasks and expecting earned value analysis to tell you anything useful. So let's take the Farm Foods website 16 as an example. Earlier on in the course we added a task here, so task 21, user testing. And because it wasn't in the baseline that we saved earlier on, if we now run earned value analysis and the figures for user testing will be included, we will get a slightly misleading set of results in relation to user testing. Now you may well accept those discrepancies like this one on the grounds that they are relatively small, but if you did discover that you'd missed a whole chunk of a project or perhaps part of a project is de-scoped, a whole set of tasks are to be taken out, it would be much more useful to save a new baseline or at least adapt the original baseline to take those tasks out of the original baseline. Now as I'll show you in a little while, by default earned value analysis uses the progress to the status state against baseline. So that is the default saved baseline. If you do need to save a different newer baseline because of major changes to the project, such as realizing you missed something, then it's a straightforward job to tell project to do earned value analysis against an alternative baseline. So let's deal with this user testing task. Now one option I have is to save a new baseline, but in this case that's not really the right thing to do. I've already recorded progress on this project, so some of these dates, for instance for tendering process and also for requirements, may well have changed since the original baseline. And what I really want to do is just add a task to the original baseline and not save a completely new one. So all I need to do is to select user testing and then update the existing default baseline. So let's go into set baseline. That's the baseline I want, and I'm going to say selected tasks, and I want to roll up the changes into the totals there and click on OK. So Project 2019 asked me to confirm that I'm updating a baseline, so I'm going to say yes, and there we are. Our baseline now includes the baseline figures for that user testing task. The next general point I need to look at relates to percentage complete. And again, I'm looking here at task 21, user testing. I can see it's a 15-day task, and by default, if at some point in that task, I say it's a certain percentage of the way through its duration, so let's suppose that we are 5 days of duration through the task, then by default, for resources that are assigned to that task, the assumption will be that 1/3 of the work has been done, so 5 days out of 15. Before I do that, I should however warn you that we're talking here basically about resources that are accrued pro rata throughout the life of a task. For resources where the costs are accrued at the start of a task, or for resources where the costs are accrued at the end, or indeed for costs assigned to a task that are accrued at the start or at the end, then this is not the case. They will be accrued at the start or the end. But when they're prorated, you have two choices. So let's open up this user testing task. And we're going to jump across to the Advanced tab. And you'll see at the bottom there is an earned value method box. And the two options are percent complete and physical percent complete. Now if you select percent complete, then Project 2019 does the calculations for you based on the percentage of the way you are through the task. So if you're a third of the way through the duration, it will assume that for appropriate costs and resources, you have incurred a third of the cost and earned 1/3 of the value. Whereas if you specify physical percent complete, you would need to enter this each time you do a status update. So for example, it may be that after a week of working on the task, 30% of the duration of the task has passed, but the task is only 20% complete. You would enter physical percent complete as 20%, and this effectively overrides the percent complete value for a task whose earned value method is physical percent complete. Now let's look at two very important project options related to earned value. So let's go up to File, down to Options, and we're going to jump into Advanced. And if we scroll all the way down, you can see we have a group here, Earned Value Options for this project. The first of them is the default Task Earned Value method. For most of my projects, I have this set at percent complete because for the sort of work that I do, it's almost always the case that percent complete is calculated by project. Now there are occasions where for specific tasks or perhaps groups of tasks, I need to change the earned value method to physical percent complete. But obviously exactly what you need to have that set to will very much depend on the sort of projects that you manage. The second very important option here is which baseline to use for the earned value calculation. Now for some reason you need to save a completely new baseline, then you'll need to change this from the default of baseline to whichever baseline you're currently using for earned value analysis and reporting. Let's now take a look at an earned value report for the current situation with the website project version 16. So up to the report ribbon, and in the costs drop down we have earned value reports. And there are actually three charts there. There's an earned value over time chart, a variance over time, and an indices over time. Now at the moment, because the level of, if you like, discrepancy from the baseline is not great, you have a situation where, for instance, with the first chart there are actually 3 lines. You may only be able to see 2 because one of them is behind another one, but let's just quickly go over what these charts show. So the first chart should show ACWP, ECWP, BCWS over time, and the text to the right there tells you how to interpret this chart. If actual cost, ACWP, that's the blue line, is higher than earned value, that's the orange line, then the project is over budget. If planned value, BCWS, that's the third line, is higher than earned value, that again is the orange line, then the project is behind schedule. Now if we scroll down, we can see the variance over time. So this is CV and SV. And as I mentioned earlier on, negative values are not good. So one point to note here is that the text on the right there is actually wrong. So the last sentence there, if SV is positive, then the project is behind schedule. That should say, if SV is negative, then the project is behind schedule. And then at the bottom there, our final chart, we have indices over time. So this is the SPI and the CPI. And again, as I mentioned to you in the course, you really want those to be at 1. So that's the current situation. So what I'm going to do now is to demonstrate a very straightforward update to this project and the effect it has on earned value. And in the next section, I'm going to set you exercise 07, which will involve a much more complex update to the schedule. And it will be a bit of a challenge for you, if only on the grounds that there are quite a few instructions. But let's do a straightforward update this time. So let's go to the project tab, and let's suppose that for one reason or another we're moving the status date 2 weeks forward. So let's click on status date, and let's just make that 2 weeks in advance, and click on OK. So what do you think that will do to earned value? Well, let's look at the earned value report now. So back to report, costs, earned value report. And when we look at our new earned value report, we can see that those changes have been reflected in the 3 charts on that page. So that's it for earned value, and that's also it for this section. So I will see you in the next one.